follow Darkwood into his private quarters. He's cleared out the barracks for the time being of any hangers-on. So the place is pretty quiet and empty. His private quarters are more functional and less prestigious than you might have imagined. This is kind of Darkwood's home away from Sigil, and it's clear that he doesn't do a lot of faction business here. So he's got a bed, he's got a meeting table with not enough
Which
chairs.
room is this?
This is this room back here.
Okay.
So you've come through this hallway, through the barracks, or the dormitory, I suppose. And
We're in his bedroom?
Yeah, this is his personal quarters. But he has a space here for people to sit at this table and meet. But there's not enough chairs to go around.
Riot sits on the bed.
At the door...
That's a power move.
At the door, the faded guard that was accompanying you back with Darkwood tries to bar Karan from entering with the rest of you. And he says that he doesn't have an invitation. At this point, the rest of you have entered into the room with Darkwood. Door is still open, with this guard trying to block Karan from coming in.
I'll turn back to Karan and say, hey, look me up at Sigil when you're not covered in blood, man. Give him a wink.
And you wink at him?
Yep.
That won't end poorly.
Karan becomes very agitated, and he begins shouting into the room at Darkwood that he demands to be allowed into the room, that this is a grave injustice of the kind that Darkwood just denounced in front of everybody, all of the powers of Sigil to hear. And if you prevent him from being part of this conversation and don't allow him to sit in on these minutes of this meeting, then... And he goes on and on like this. And Darkwood just lets him ramble for a while. What do you guys do in response?
I'm going to check out Darkwood's room while nothing's happening.
Now, by check out, do you mean just sit on the bed and look around, or do you mean...
No, I mean, like, actively go and investigate things. Like, what's that? Like, what's through here? What's on his
Lock
shelves?
doors.
Things like that. Okay.
He does have a little bedside table. Is locked. He has a glass display case over here with hunting trophies and things in it. Also locked. The door to his private privy here, locked.
I'm sorry, I was picturing when you said hunting trophies for a split second, my mind went like, these are trophies for hunting? Like, first place!
World's best hunter.
All Beastlands Pro National.
So, yeah, Rowan Darkwood has everything on lockdown in here.
Literally.
Oh, yeah, very literally. At the foot of the bed is a large footlocker. Again, locked.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, Darkwood tells the guard to let Karan in.
And Riot objects to this.
And Darkwood tells Riot that she has no place to object, considering this is his home, and that she is a guest in it.
Mahogany asked Darkwood if he had like an internal timer, and he was just waiting for Karan to go past that before he let him in.
He says he wants to see where this goes.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
So yes.
Karan looks very pleased. He also takes note of that Riot attempted to object, and decides that Riot is now his best friend in the room. And follows her around a little bit, checking out the locks as she's trying to open doors.
I look a little hurt.
And eventually he sits down on the bed, very, very close to her.
Mm-hmm.
He bids the rest of you to sit around the table. He apologized that there aren't enough chairs, but he wasn't expecting to entertain so many private guests tonight.
Riot puts an arm around Karan and gives him a big squeeze.
I should get dice.
Should also get a token for Karan in here.
Not for Darkwood though.
Nah,
Are
Darkwood's
you
just
saying
kind of like.
Karan is a member of the party?
Usually I
I'm
try
saying
to do this.
I want to know where Kron is at all times.
Usually I try to do this before the session, but unfortunately tonight I forgot.
Yeah,
There we
Things
go.
happened.
you had good reason.
I don't think I've ever once heard you do this session without making a huge amount of noise of you pouring dice. I think you're bullshitting.
Oh no, you guys always hear it, but I'm saying I usually do it before I go live. Oh yeah, I always dump them out for you guys because I want to instill the fear of the DM in you.
I don't fear
You give Karan a big squeeze, and he whispers in your ear, "Let's keep this strictly business. I'm gay anyway. Usually." Darkwood goes over to the trophy case, takes out a ring of keys from beneath his cloak, opens the glass door, and he pulls out, one after another, 5 large sacks of coins. And these bags are pretty heavy looking. It takes him 2 hands to carry each one over to the table, and he places all 5 of them on. And they're tied with what looks like a silk ribbon. He sets one at the table in front of each of you sitting there. Who was all sitting at the table?
Liberation's. Oh, go ahead.
Kelian is standing, leaning against the door, acting all too cool for school.
Okay.
Liberation was doing much the same next to Kelian.
Well, how
I
are
mean,
you
this-
sitting at the table, just fiddling with the chair?
Okay. What about Serenity?
I mean, at this point, Serenity will be at the table if he's, you know.
Then Mahogany and
stuff on it.
Serenity, he places the sacks in front of you at the table. He places 2 more sacks a little closer to the door, nodding at Kelian and Liberation. And Riot, he comes over to you, and dumps yours in your lap. And these sacks are jingling and heavy with coin. And he tells you that this is payment for services rendered. Then he takes his seat in a slightly nicer chair than the rest of you have, and begins stuffing his pipe.
What did we do?
Liberation starts filling his pipe as well.
He looks at Kelian, and he holds his finger, and he traces the scar down his face. Darkwood he's blind in one eye, and he has this great scar going down his face. And he wears this scar like a badge of honor. And he asks Kelian, "Have you told your friends how I got this scar?"
I'm sorry.
Do I know how he has a scar?
That depends on how fanatical you were a follower in the faction before you became kind of disenchanted with Darkwood.
Didn't Kelian also have a meeting once with Darkwood where Darkwood just talked for hours and hours?
Oh yeah, that's every meeting with Darkwood. This whole session.
I feel like it would have come up though.
I'll leave that up to Kelian. If
Yeah.
if Kelian was ever serious about moving up in the Fated, then yes, you would know this story already.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kelian would probably know then.
So what you know about Darkwood's personal history is that he was a duke, a landowner on a prime world called Toril. One of the few primes to come to Sigil and actually make his way. His sons got hold of a magical deck of cards and accidentally summoned a very powerful Beatisu. And Darkwood chose to challenge that devil to a game in order to play for his son's lives. And he cheated and he won, but the devil took him back to Beator in their stead.
Dangerous game, that.
He was enslaved in the hellish mines for years. The scar came from a Cornugon's whip, one of his slave drivers. Got him in the face one day when he was being defiant. Eventually, he managed to trick his owners and slip the bonds and make his way back to Toril, but by that time, his lands had changed hands, somebody had conquered, his sons had grown up and married, and there was nothing left for him there. So he came to Sigil and That's the story of him.
Okay. When Darkwood asks if Kelian has told the story about the scar, he basically just tells the story to everyone in the room then. Exactly like that.
Darkwood reaches back and unties his graying hair. He says that he went back to Beator years later, shortly before he joined the Fated, and found that corner gone. And he pulls this leather strap and places it on the table. Says that now that bastard holds my hair together. You five have been instrumental in toppling a slavery ring in Sigil that had not escaped my notice, but that I had been unable to do much about.
You know, it's the thing I do.
The five of you identified the Dao slaver, Jandar, went to the Plane of Fire, brought violence to his house, and freed many of those who were in prison there. So I'm paying you each 1,200 pieces of gold for that service.
Riot pipes up and says, "You know that Dao had his fingers in all sorts of factions, including your ex's."
He says he's well aware that elements of his of that ring were also prominent inside of the Fated, and that Darkwood has been bending a great amount of resources to digging them out and exposing them.
Liberation looks to Kelian for a second and says, "Hey, didn't you have a boss who was like that?"
Yeah. Took care of him.
He was the most powerful guy in Sigil, right?
No, that was my boss.
Okay.
Was that your boss?
It's a pretty loose structure.
Do you even have a boss?
Also,
Not anymore.
Liberation and I just freed another slave from a devil bar if you want to add another 100.
That was fun.
I mean, I've always assumed on her taxes, right, it says she's self-employed.
I would be very, very surprised if Riot ever paid taxes ever.
Riot doesn't own anything to tax.
Mahogany waves his hand. Taxes.
Does she bring that up in front of Darkwood? Because he can change that real quick. Oh,
Well,
no
no.
tax. Sorry. You run a temple.
The Osprey tax.
So Darkwood says as he's puffing on his pipe. So that's where we'll start the discussion. You did a great service for the city I love, and you've now been officially paid for it.
Ah, I see. So
that happened a couple of months ago. Why are you just now getting around to taking care of this, Dad?
Because whatever he's about to ask of us, he doesn't want to owe us anything first.
He says he didn't get to where he is in life by owing anybody anything. But it's taken a couple of months to build a comprehensive enough dossier on each of you. The only one that he was sure about beforehand was Kelian. The rest of you, he's been watching for a while. He wanted to know what your motives were. And, of course...
Asking us, or... Oh, no, that's because he was doing research. Got it.
Yeah, he was building a dossier on each of you. And then he says, and of course, the lady is right, because I'm about to ask something of each of you. I feel that you have particular talents and skills that I may be able to make use of. And in return, I have no small amounts of wealth, information, business, and faction contacts. There's no reason I shouldn't be having a discussion with you.
I agree.
Yeah, Mahogany will take the gold if he wants to pay him. He's not going to turn it down.
Is anybody refusing?
Yeah, Serenity's
the gold?
fine with it.
No, Liberation takes the sack.
There is visible eagerness in Riot's eyes as Darkwood starts to lay out this offer.
Liberation picks up Kelian's bag, holds it out to him.
And he snatches the bag away from...
Liberation grins, goes back to puffing his pipe.
Before he gets down to business, he says he has a gift for each of you or for all of you collectively, from his courtesy of his former girlfriend, let's say. On the table, he places a stack of copper plates that look very familiar to you.
Huh.
8 of them. He spreads them out on the table like a deck of cards. And on top of them, he places a scroll that is bound and sealed with the sigil of the Mercy Killers. He says that these copper plates came to him very recently at the end of a very rigorous investigation, and they correspond with 8 prominent Sigillians that were proof to Darkwood that they were and continue to be beneficiaries of slavery in and off Sigil. He points to the scroll and says that is a writ signed in Factal Nylesia's hand, stating that killing these individuals is justice being done and not murder in the eyes of the law. And don't worry, it's a binding writ.
Ah!
Do with this what you see fit. And he pushes them across the table to Mahogany and Serenity.
Liberation's already stepping forward to take a look at him.
Okay.
I'm not going to stop him.
I'll break the seal on the scroll and start taking a look at it.
Darkwood then turns his attention to Riot briefly.
Mhm.
This is the lovely chatterbox. I respect you as a capable member of this group, and I am amused by your efforts to convert members of my faction to your fledgling religion.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'll find ways to turn that to my benefit, but I have no requests to make of an anarchist. You're dismissed if you care to go.
I'll stay.
She's part of the team. She goes nowhere.
I already said that.
Karan leans back over to Riot and whispers, "Think I can get some of that gold? I owe a lot of
Red
people
says-
a lot of money."
Red says, I give all my gold members to my cell. You want to join my cell?
I would love nothing better to join your cell. I have literally been waiting all my life for you to ask me that.
Come by my temple and we'll talk.
Throughout the rest of this conversation, with Darkwood is addressing them, Karan is badgering you in your ear with tons of questions about your cell and all of its operations. He wants to know if he gets matching robes. He wants to know if he has to wear furry legs. He wants to know all kinds of crazy things about your cell, and most of it's just nonsense.
Yeah, Riot doesn't like even look at him, let alone respond to any of this.
He turns to the ciphers next. Because the request he makes of them is the most difficult for you all to keep. He says he wants to sit down with your Factal and some other cipher high-ups. This is something that you know Reese doesn't do. She doesn't grant private audiences. She's more of a, if you have something to say to me, say it in public kind of person. But Darkwood really has a proposal for her that he thinks the ciphers need to consider privately. And he wants the two of you to put a bug in her ear about it.
Mahogany says, I'll tell her, and then if she's going to do it, she will.
Yeah, Serenity just nods. That was exactly what she was going to say.
And he says, as payment for this service, you have his word as Factal of the Fated and as a Duke that he will not use his knowledge of Hollis Dwath, the Fallen Harmonium, and his operation as a bargaining chip with future deals with that faction. This is something he's been sitting on. If you give me your word that you will put that in her ear, I give you mine that that information goes away.
Where exactly do you sit with the Mercy Killers now?
And he takes a big puff on his pipe. And
Because they were pretty gun ho with working with the hardheads.
He says a hell of a lot better now than yesterday. Thank you for asking.
So you gave your word as a duke and as head of the Fated. Which of those would you value higher?
He says the value of both is incalculable. He says that being placed in a position of authority over people, whether it be in his dukedom on his own world, having serfs and peasants who look to him for protection and for their livelihood, or it be the people of Sigil in their faction, in his faction and other factions that you deal with, keeping things organized, keeping the records kept, using the funds collected through taxes for city works, that these are both roles that he's internalized, that he can't put any sort of value on them, that he views them both as being an honor and a burden. He tells you that if you manage to come through and get him in a room with Reese with no other ears, that he will fulfill a reasonable request regarding arming and outfitting Dwath's people.
Do you have a horse in that race?
He says, no, I absolutely do not. But you do. And I have considerable resources that I can put to that end. You tell me those men need 1,000 good spears, I'll see them made.
I mean, they probably need more political info. I'm pretty sure everyone would prefer not to come to two armies fighting in the streets of Sigil. They need political influence and the ability to just throw out the rod at the top. Most hardheads will generally fall in line if the person at the top is giving orders no matter what.
He says we'll take things one step at a time. First, get him into a room with Reese. Then we'll discuss what Hollis Dwath and his people need. So, Riot, as the church, do they have Pancake Wednesdays?
Riot, at some point, ask Ron if he wants to taste Tiefling food.
He tells you that he prefers an oven roasted Tiefling, one that's been well plucked, basted in its own juices, if possible. Liberation.
Hey.
Darkwood knows the least about you of anybody in the room.
Well, it's pretty. It's not that difficult. I mean, or rather, it's not that surprising. I mean, I'm only a couple of months old as it is.
He says that he recognizes you having been reborn into the body of a prime rather than a planner. And he asks you if you knows the implications of that.
Nope. I mean, I did, Mahogany. I went to a devil bar a couple of nights ago, and that was a thing that happened. But that's it. That's really all I know about it.
It was all right.
I drank the stuff, tasted like acid going down. Oh, that was pretty good.
He said that there are particular qualities that primes have that planners do not, that can be useful in certain situations. However, able-bodied primes who are actually kind of plain savvy, who kind of know how to take care of themselves out on the plains, are very few and far between. What he needs you to do is find out whether or not you have a silver cord.
Silver cord? That's an astral thing, yeah?
He nods.
Huh.
So you know more than you let on.
Well, only stories. I've never been to the astral plane myself, and neither is Elsie Cologne.
He says if you find out the answer to this question and come back to him with it, that he'll make himself available at the Hall of Records if you schedule an appointment. That he might have a job for you to do.
Okay.
That nobody else in this room could perform. Finally, he turns to Kelian.
Liberation takes 2 steps to the side.
There's no smell of urine emanating from Kelian at all.
None whatsoever.
None whatsoever. Sorry, go ahead.
So what's Kelian's demeanor throughout the early parts of this meeting?
Mild amusement. Like I said, pretending he's too cool for school. Like, this is so below him.
In that case, you hear no small amount of condescension in Darkwood's voice when he addresses you. He tells you that he is more proud of you than most of the low-ranking members of his faction. He says that at first he wasn't sure what to make of you. He offered a very reasonable payment for delivery of a box, which you did not make good on. He threatened you, he insulted you, he took away every possession you had in Sigil, erased your holdings, and your response was to go out into the plains and make your own way. Your response was to go and find wealth, and find prestige, and seize it, and bring it back. And he says, if I were the sentimental type, it would bring a tear to my eye, truly.
Kelian doesn't say anything.
He says, I want access to the locksmith.
What do you need access to the locksmith for? And Kelian genuinely says that because he's surprised.
He's surprised? Why is he surprised?
Because Darkwood is Factal of the Fated and probably knows way more about everything than the locksmith does.
Oh, he does. Make no mistake about that.
Yeah.
He says that a smart man always watches his blind spots. He tells you that yesterday, when he was discussing this party with Nylesia, that she didn't see this blind side coming. That she had her next 6, 8, 12 months of political maneuvering planned. That she thought everything had fallen into place. But she missed the blind spots. She didn't see that it no longer made sense for me to continue the relationship. That it no longer made sense for my faction to support hers. She failed to see that for me this was a business arrangement all along.
Can I, in Riot, yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
Riot Pups, can I ask where that soured?
And he says,
what made you decide that you didn't need her anymore?
Darling priest, it was always sweet. He says the problem with having blind spots is no man can see his own blind spots. You don't know what you don't know. What I know is I have an ambitious and somewhat arrogant young Fated member, someone who knows how to seize what he wants and bring it back. Somebody who doesn't lament his existence when things are taken from him or when things go wrong. And that this person has built for himself an information brokering, or a network brokering an information. If I have blind spots, I think the locksmith might be just the tool to identify them. Now, when he says he wants access, he means he wants free access. He wants to enter a business arrangement with you where he gets preferential treatment over other customers.
And what does the locksmith get out of this preferential treatment?
He says that he is going to assign 2 clerks in the Hall of Records to be your personal assistants inside the Fated. They won't be made aware of the locksmith's existence. They won't be made aware of why the information they're digging up is worthwhile. Only that you're their boss and what you say goes. That's access to the Hall of Records that you would not otherwise have. And what essentially what he's telling you is you can go digging around in the Hall of Records and you won't be leaving paper trails. You won't be leaving breadcrumbs for somebody else to discover and try to figure out what you're up to.
No bribes either, I imagine.
Exactly.
All right. I will take it to the locksmith, and we'll figure out what he or she says.
And he smiles broadly, and he says, yes, take it to the locksmith and see what he or she says.
Yes. Indeed.
He then asks, kind of wanted to take your temperature on the streets of Sigil, on the violence that's been erupting recently. He wants to know, truthfully, how much of it you believe is the direct result of Nylesia's proclamation earlier in the year.
Is this to Kelian or is this to everybody?
This is just open conversation at this point. He's concluded business and is ready to just lecture you for hours.
Riot says, I hated that woman like I hated nobody else.
I mean, Serenity's of the opinion there's probably a significant amount. I mean, basically, if you take the amount of violence there normally is in the streets, which isn't pretty in some parts, and subtract that from where we are, we're pretty much back where I think we are after the proclamation.
Liberation pulls out the journal and pages through it and says, well, LC Cologne said, like, he's written 3 pages about how much he hates this, hated the whole draconian punishment thing. I'm not too much of a fan of it either, but I haven't, dedicated ink to it.
Riot says, I have 2 cells. One under my personal direction and one that I'm bankrolling. Both of them were dedicated to bringing down Nylesia.
Do you mean directly or ultimately?
Ultimately.
No, I'm asking. Darkwood.
Oh.
Wait, you were asking Darkwood what? I'm not sure I followed that.
Well, Mahogany clarifies. He's like, so do you mean like because of the proclamation, or like just like all ultimately how much? Because I mean, there's things that caused the proclamation, surely.
He says that he wishes he had the opportunity to meet Malin while he was factal of the Mercy Killers. That he's heard that Malin was a very reasonable sort, easy to do business with, who truly had the City of Door's best interests at heart. He says it's too bad Nylesia had him assassinated.
Is that public knowledge?
It is
So did
not
that
public
happen?
knowledge. It's a rumor that Riot's heard because she's been infiltrating the Mercy Killers.
Kelian lifts an eyebrow at that.
He tells Riot that it's not time to bring the Mercy Killers down. The destruction of the prison, the dismantling of the faction, that's all going to have to wait. Things are going to have to get bloodier before they improve.
Riot bristles a little bit and says, "You know, one of those two factions was looking into you. It was a dual operation."
And he nods and he says he's well aware.
And Riot says, "And now I got 2 cells with nothing to do."
He tells you to leave them there. He can't tell you what to do. He's not looking to enter a business arrangement with you at all.
But Riot is looking to enter a business arrangement with him.
Are you?
Yeah, and she'll say as much. I said, "I know she didn't have an arrangement for me, but I've got one for you."
And he cuts you off and says that there's no point in him even hearing it. Any business arrangement that he enters with you, any deals he makes, or if he shakes your hand, he knows at the first opportunity you will betray that trust.
You don't know that. You don't know me at all. Remember, Riot says, I'm also a priestess in addition to an anarchist.
In the corner of the room, Mahogany's going like, eh.
He says the best that he can do for you is, if you want to continue giving him updates, not personally, mind you, I mean, he has to keep up appearances, but if you want to continue to give him updates of what your cells are doing and how they're operating, he's sure he can make use of the information.
If you want to give me a target, we can do better than that.
He looks back at Kelian. He says, one thing I do like about you, Kelian. You don't overestimate your abilities.
Wow. That was both a swing at Kelian and Riot. That's really good.
Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, Mahogany's still going,
Rich just sitting there next to Kelian, and he's just like,
I'm remembering a lot of bow shots that perhaps overestimated their abilities.
And Riot, at this point, Karan has stopped whispering in your ear, and you hear his tongue start to lap around the edges of it.
Riot will lean into it. If Darkwood's not going to give the time of day, she might as well give it to the one who wants her.
He's been absolutely
Liberation looks a little grumpy.
He's what?
Liberation looks a little grumpy.
No, not you, the DM.
Oh. He's been absolutely ignoring Karan. He has not even making eye contact. He wants to then know the last time any of you witnessed the Lady of Pain in the streets.
Try to avoid her if at all possible.
What the hell kind of question is that? And Kelian actively says that, surprised again.
Shani just sort of shakes her head. No.
He says it's not really the kind of thing you think about until somebody points it out, is it?
About eight and a half years ago.
It's an oddly specific answer.
Well, I got into Sigil about 8.5 years ago. And what are you going to do when you first arrive in Sigil? And then I decided not to do that anymore.
I try to not see... I try not to incur her wrath when the opportunity presents itself.
Is that something that you worry about daily?
Not daily. I imagine it's something we all worry about.
About 3 months ago.
I mean, if I was worried about it, I'd do something
just
about
looks
it.
at Mahogany.
Liberation looks at Serenity
Troy
like,
kinda
okay,
has
so
a half shrug.
what are you gonna do about the Lady of Pain?
Not piss her off.
Honestly, okay.
Kill a monk.
Kill a monk. That'll do it.
What? Mahogany's just been answering everyone's hypothetical questions honestly. What are you gonna do about pissing off the Lady of Pain? Oh, we'll do this thing. Kill a monk.
Let me guess. Are you not afraid of the Lady of Pain?
So do you know why I'm a duke and not a king?
So you know how to play it
Genealogy?
safe?
He nods at Liberation. He says, the man that sits in the biggest chair is the biggest target. I admit, perhaps I was over hasty in seizing the large chair I now sit as factal. But
Yeah, is that
reaching-
true? Did you really just walk in one day and just say, no, this is my faction now? Because that's impressive.
You realize I can have you magically silenced if you continue to interrupt me, boy.
Liberation shrugs.
He says that to overreach one's station, to reach higher than one has the means to hold, is the most grievous sin one can commit for oneself.
Liberation frowns a little bit, but he doesn't say anything.
When I first arrived in Sigil, I thought stories about the Lady of Pain were insane. Just the mad ramblings of the barmies in the streets. I can still remember the first time that I saw her with my own eye. And he launches into this whole story. And it sounds just a pretty reasonable to everybody here. I mean, it doesn't go much deeper than he saw her floating down the street, but he was just in awe of this wild and insane city that touches every place in the multiverse, and the people in the streets parted ways as she went by, and the reverence. Nobody looked. Nobody said anything. Nobody made a move. It's like the city flowed around her. And he never saw anything like that. All he had to compare it to was his king back on the Prime World, and his royal train coming through, and how he was just mobbed by peasants and clerks and shopkeepers, and how he had a whole cadre of knights surrounding him to protect his wealth and his person from all these hangers-on. And he wonders if anybody in Sigil has the ability to reach that high. How big must her chair be?
I mean, the powers are afraid of her, so I'm not entirely sure that's the right metaphor to even be using. I mean, to me, that's like asking how you can control the wind. You know,
I don't know if it's so much the powers are afraid of her, but they just like any other, like those people you saw apart, they give her a wide berth. I don't know if it actually has to do with fear, but who are we to ponder the workings of a god's mind?
He says, "Oh, make no mistake. All power is rooted in fear. All authority stems to the fear of violence."
What are you getting at? Kelian says that directly, bluntly.
So I'm sorry, Kelian. Are my stories boring you? Do you not find the conversation to your liking?
Right as if on the bed. She's taking advantage of being on the bed with Karan.
There are few things I fear in this multiverse, and one of them is the lady. And I am shocked, absolutely shocked, someone who is as smart and as connected as you are, does not share that same fear. And the way you glibly talk about her sitting in her chair, and her being, and about power and authority, I don't know what you're up to, but it sounds crazy. It's the talk of a barmy.
He looks around. He says, "You realize we're sitting safely in my long hall on Eastgard, very far from the City of Doors. She can't hear you here, Kelian. But who knows? Perhaps under those bladed robes she wears, she does have an ass to kiss."
I'm not going to be the one to go looking under there. I'll tell you that much.
Before arriving in Sigil, he launches into another story. Before arriving in Sigil, he traveled the plains and went to the realms of many powers. In one such realm, he met his own god, Heimdall, who was a giant robot, if I remember.
Who, what now? You cut out for a second.
One of the powers that he met was Heimdall, and he converted to being a priest of Heimdall. And he never felt reverence for those places, even standing in the halls of gods, that he felt upon arriving in Sigil and seeing that all of the stories he heard about this lady were not only true, but that the proof of their truth was only in seeing her. She didn't even do anything. She just floated down the street. Maybe it's a prime thing. Maybe you have to come from a real world to really have an appreciation for that. If you're born into a place with 1,000,000,000 billion doors, perhaps it is just the talk of an old whimsical man.
Well, I just want to say I always appreciate when a prime comes here and makes something of themselves.
Liberation looks a little hurt at that. He's referring to Darkwood and not himself.
And Darkwood says kind of sarcastically that he's very glad that he has your approval.
Mahogany nods and sits back down.
At this point, the Duke simply... I mean, he steers the conversation to many different topics over the course of the evening, and he does love the sound of his own voice. Does anybody here have something that they want to put to the Duke at any point?
Can you tell me any more about this thing that I apparently need a silver cord for?
Tells you not until you're sure that you have one.
Huh, fabulous.
This is a need-to-know affair.
Mm.
Okay, I'm going to restart my laptop, which means all my notes are going to go away for about 5 minutes. But that's okay. Unless somebody starts combat with Darkwood.
No. Right's not going to start combat, but she's going to leave the bag behind of gold.
So at the end of the conversation, it's your intention to leave the bag behind?
Yep.
Oh, Kelian will take the bag then.
But nobody else is going to try to take control of the conversation? Nobody else has a topic they want to broach with the Duke?
No.
Mahogany asks for just more information. This doesn't need to happen in character, but like just for what Mahogany's doing. He's mostly asking for more things about like when he first arrived at Sigil, like what he thought about the place, what he thought about the planes.
And yeah, he speaks at immense, terrible length on these topics. And it's always, always, always very self-serving. He's always the star of his own stories.
The main thing that Mahogany gets into is like any planes that he heard about back when he was on a Prime that are now different now that he's here. Mahogany's been curious about that ever since they
all of
were
them.
over in the... Yeah, exactly.
Every plane that he's visited has felt the boot of Darkwood and is a better place for having done so.
No. That's not what Mahogany meant. I was referring to when we were in the Prime world and we talked to Swame and they were talking about the Elvish plane, which we know as a different plane, and how those two things are different.
He tells you that when they speak of the Sylvan Plains, speaking of Arborea, he says they're not wrong. The Primes, the people in the world who view these places as the homes of gods, in many ways, they have a better handle on what the planes are than the average citizen in Sigil. Because to him, in his world, his dukedom that he was raised in and that he inherited and that he fought for, the gods were not real in the sense that you could reach out and touch them. They were ideas, they were concepts, and your belief didn't shape your life. You had to shape your own life. You had to you take from the soil what you could get from it. And he says the reason that he thinks that Primes have a better conception of what these places are is because these are fantastic, infinite worlds to them. They're worlds of intangibility. He tells you if you met a Prime that told you fantastic stories about the Sylvan Plane, and your first thought was, oh, you mean Arborea, then it's you that have a lot to learn about Arborea. And yes, Arborea is a better place now that the boots of Duke Darkwood have trod upon it. Was that a more comprehensive answer to your thoughts?
No, that was good.
Is Kelian saying something?
He trying to form the question in my head.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time doing it. What Kelian doesn't understand is, for someone who appreciates the fantastical nature of the planes and the awe and the majesty of them, why he can't therefore respect them, a la the Lady of Pain, rather than thinking about how it's something to take advantage of, that it can't let it just be as it is. That as like a question. That makes sense?
He tells Kelian that the multiverse is only as good of a place as it is, that the planes are only as good as they are, that each world is only as good as it is, because people looked at them and said not good enough, and then fixed them. Every power that built a realm improved the multiverse by seeing something that wasn't there and then building it. Every king that has a kingdom and built a castle improved the land by putting the walls up, by attracting serfs to work the soil. Every faction that holds power in Sigil plays a role in Sigil's dealings and does something for the city. And every faction exists because somebody saw a service that wasn't being provided. The multiverse is not a place to be left alone. The multiverse is clay to be molded.
Mahogany's nodding along with this.
So is Mahogany about to convert to the Fated? Is that what's happening here?
No, but he a lot of what Darkwood is saying are things that Mahogany himself has said.
Liberation finds himself agreeing with Darkwood, which kind of weirds him out a little bit, but
It's just you have to like basically, you know, when you get a little mold on the cheese and you have to cut it off, but you still got pretty good cheese. That's basically Darkwood's beliefs, with Darkwood himself being the mold.
I mean, Serenity doesn't necessarily think that building a wall improves a field, and she certainly doesn't think that various abyssal lords would improve realms moving in there and building on those, but...
Exactly.
She's like, well, whatever, dude. She doesn't want to argue the finer points of philosophy with a taker.
Riot. When the evening is over and the conversation ends and you all are leaving, he does not allow you to leave the bag behind.
And I say to him, I thought that you and I had no business.
He says, we don't. Nonetheless, that's payment for services already rendered.
It's not the payment I wanted.
He says, what do you believe your work is valued at?
He says, I don't care about gold. I got a temple that I built myself, and if I'm ever kicked out of it, I can fend for myself fine in the streets.
He asks you, are the rest of you leaving with the gold at this point? This is after all the conversation has ended for the night.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think
Kelian's
anyone
leaving
else
with
left
his
behind.
gold, and he's carrying Riot's gold.
No, he's not. At this point, Darkwood and Riot are having a conversation about the gold. So Riot gives him this spiel about this temple that she built herself, etc. He asks her in a threatening tone of voice, how difficult do you think it would be for him to reduce your temple to rubble, have every follower of Osprey march through a portal and out of Sigil, the place where your temple stood salted, so that nothing can be built there again?
Well,
Are we all hearing this conversation?
No, everybody else is left at this point. Riot was the last one to leave. Karan was the first one to leave. He was bored.
Yeah, Riot says, I don't suppose that would be difficult at all. But it wouldn't do anything for you, because I still wouldn't have your gold. If you want to pay me, you can pay me in some other coin.
He's very unhappy with you right now. Like, you are definitely getting under his skin.
I haven't done this in a while.
Wait, I thought you did it to some senseis last session.
Yeah, but they were just some average nobodies. I mean, I haven't gotten Riot into trouble in a while.